Position by position we go, evaluating the 2021 San Francisco Giants, who won 107 games, the most in franchise history. So obviously, a lot of success we're going to find when we go and evaluate these positions. But the goal is to basically look back, see what happened, evaluate, but also look forward and see if there are areas where the Giants are going to be, needing to upgrade in 2022. And we're also all along the way talking about the kind of contract statuses of the various players at these positions. So yesterday we talked about the outfield. Today we're going to transition to the infield, including the catcher position. So all of that next on today's Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants Baseball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you so much for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, which now includes YouTube, so please check us out there. And as I said, coming up on today's show, we are going to go position by position, continue to go position by position, looking at the San Francisco Giants, the state of the San Francisco Giants around the infield. Unlike the outfield where we talked about there was utter flexibility. The Giants have no commitments to any outfielders, but a lot of club control over almost every single outfielder. So that's kind of the dream scenario. Obviously, yeah, if you've got Mookie Betts locked up, then that's great too. But if you have kind of players performing well, but you're also not committed to anything, it gives you that roster flexibility because as we see in the game of baseball, there's inconsistent performance, and sometimes evaluations change year to year. Like Alex Dickerson was a monster in the short 2020 season, and then this year he was kind of a no-show and has become a non-tender candidate, just as an example. But in the infield, the story is different. Not to say it's worse, but it's different. We've got Evan Longoria under contract for one additional season in 2022. You've got Brandon Crawford, who was set to reach free agency in after the 2021 season, but they extended him mid-season to a 2-year, $32 million extension. They've got Tommy La Stella under contract for 2022 and 2023. Donovan Solano is reaching free agency. Wilmer Flores, there's a club option. Brandon Belt reaching free agency. So just anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on here in the Giants infield and decisions to make. And that first decision, we've talked about it all week, is at the catcher position. And it's a no-brainer if Buster Posey wants to continue his playing career. The Giants have a $22 million club option that they can simply pick up and at the very least just have him back for $22 million in 2022. But, honestly, they may want even more than that. They may want to sign him to an extension if he is agreeable to that. So anyway, evaluating the Giants, the first place to start is arguably their most important position on the field and where they may have the biggest advantage of all, and that is the catcher position, where the Giants were fantastic combined with their catchers this year, and so much of it, of course, had to do with Buster Posey. So collectively, their catchers actually accumulated the third most Fangraphs wins above replacement. And I know, wins above replacement, not everyone wants to use that or talk about that. But just as a note, if we're using Baseball Reference wins above replacement, which a lot of people do for catchers, they're not including pitch framing as Fangraphs does. And so that's why I definitely prefer Fangraphs when we're talking about catchers. So collectively, the Giants catchers were a really good hitting group. They were the third best hitting group behind the White Sox, who have Yasmani Grandal, and also behind the Tampa Bay Rays, who got excellent production out of Mike Zunino this year. But anyway, the Giants catchers were great offensively, and Buster Posey was single-handedly the most valuable catcher by himself by wins above replacement. And that's really impressive that he did that in just 113 games, 454 plate appearances. So as I said, they have that club option on Posey for 2022, so they can bring him back assuming he wants to keep playing. And Curt Casali, that's where there's going to be a question mark. He had a kind of down-ish, I mean, he's not a great offensive player, but he didn't have a great offensive year. He's had sometimes good offensive seasons in his career. But man, when he caught, he was a difference maker kind of defensively and calling games, and the Giants had a ton of success in the games that he started. They had some ridiculous record like 42-12 or something in games that he started. That's probably I'm not nailing that number. I'm just going off memory and it's wrong. But anyway, they had a very good winning percentage in games started by Curt Casali. And the fact is he has another year of team control, so they could retain him through the arbitration process if they so desire. And the question, remains to be seen. Are they going to want to bring back Curt Casali? Because, of course, they have Joey Bart in the minor leagues at the upper levels of the minors. Yeah, Curt Casali has one more year of arbitration eligibility and is projected to make $2 million. So basically, the Giants just want to decide, do they want to bring back Curt Casali for around $2 million? It would give them that flexibility that I'm talking about because it's not a big commitment. And if you want to, transition in Joey Bart, it wouldn't be the most difficult thing to cut ties with an underperforming Casali potentially. So I'm getting ahead of myself. There are some catchers on the open market this winter who are intriguing. Manny Pena kind of comes to mind. But eventually the Giants and Joey Bart, Bart's going to need to either sink or swim at the major league level. They can't just keep him in the upper minors forever, especially if he's performing well there. So this is an area where they may make a trade. It's a fascinating position to watch, and we're going to find out some answers shortly. Within 5 days of the World Series ending, teams have to make decisions on those club options, and players have to make decisions on player options. But that's going to be one of the first things to watch this offseason. So anyway, coming up next, we'll continue to look around the infield, third all the way over to first. So stay tuned for that. But first, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the exact same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Just find out what the part is, order it yourself, save a bunch of money with rockauto.com. Go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices. All the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. All right, thank you so much for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Once again, we are free and available on all platforms. And as I said, we're going to continue to look at the state of the Giants infield. So, Brendan Belt is probably the next place to go here because he is a hot topic for a good reason. He's always been a hot topic for the San Francisco Giants. But when I sort on Fangraphs for, production at the first base position, guess which team shows up at the very top? It's the San Francisco Giants with 7.1 wins above replacement by their first baseman this season. Now, I realized this after initially looking at it, that they're only counting here players whose primary position was first base. This is really not the way I wanted to look at it. They're seeing, okay, so to be clear, Brandon Belt, Darin Ruf, and Wilmer Flores were the three Giants. At least that's what I think they're doing here based on the fact that those are the only three players being counted. They're not counting guys like LaMonte Wade Jr., who made a bunch of starts at first base, but his primary position was in the outfield. So I really want to know, and I'll have to keep looking, I guess, and maybe we'll talk about it later. I want to know what the Giants' production was from players who played first base at any point. If they started at first base, as long as they were in the game technically as the first baseman, I want to know what that production was. And I'm sure they were near the top in that category as well. But anyway, for these purposes, they're only counting those three guys. But, with that being the criteria, the Giants were number one in baseball by a wide margin at 7.1 wins above replacement. Next closest team, Toronto Blue Jays, who had MVP candidate Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who hit like 50 home runs of his own. I don't know the exact number. I'm pulling it up here. He hit 48 home runs, put up 6.7 wins above replacement by himself. And the Giants starters at first base, or primary first baseman, did better than that collectively. And that's kind of the story of this team, is that collectively the production was just fantastic, but they don't have, a young 20s stud hitting 48 home runs. And third place was the Dodgers, with Max Muncy having a great season. So it's really impressive, and so much of that had to do with Brandon Belt, who truly has established himself as, what I mean to say is over the last couple of years, he has hit as well as anyone. I haven't verified this myself. I looked at it all season long, but I didn't look at the end of season results. But Brandon Belt, when you look at 2020 and 2021 weighted runs created plus leaders, not just at first base, but overall. And weighted runs created plus, for those of you who don't know, is just an all-encompassing offensive metric, similar to OPS plus, but a little better, in my opinion. And 100 is league average. And Brandon Belt was third between 2020 and 2021 in that category, behind Mike Trout and Juan Soto. So just unreal offensive production from Brandon Belt. And in 2021, it was obviously more of the same. 378 on base, 597 slugging, 29 home runs, all in just 97 games. So obviously the injury history is a story for Belt. He does get hurt a lot. But this year, it was kind of a fluke thing again. He gets hit by a pitch on the thumb. Also had that knee issue that kept him out a long time. I guess the thumb thing didn't keep him out that long, but it was certainly a factor in the postseason. But anyway, so Brandon Belt, before I move on, is a free agent at the end of this season. So now, and they can offer him the qualifying offer, and I believe they will. It's a 1-year offer for $18.4 million, and he would have the choice to negotiate something else, or he could just flat out accept it, or he could reject it. And if he rejects it and signs elsewhere, the Giants get draft pick compensation for that. So they're going to want him back, and for good reason. The production is legit for those of you who still have doubts about Brandon Belt. He is good, and he should be back. And so that's my stance on that. But also, Darin Ruf can be brought back. Wilmer Flores can be brought back. Flores has a club option for $3.5 million. Ruf projected to make $2.6 million in arbitration, and is under team control for actually 2 additional seasons, not just next year. LaMonte Wade Jr. under club control for many more seasons, 4 more seasons. So the Giants are in pretty good shape at this position behind Brandon Belt, but I really do think that you do want to bring back Brandon Belt first. It is a possibility that they kind of platoon their way through at first base. If Belt goes elsewhere, they could survive it. Ruf and Flores and Wade Jr. could kind of platoon there, and then maybe you upgrade in the outfield, because those guys wouldn't be playing in the outfield as much if they were playing primarily first base. And also something we keep failing to mention, there very well may be a universal designated hitter starting in 2022. The collective bargaining agreement is expiring December 1st, and in the new CBA, there's kind of agreement on both sides that the universal DH would be something that they want. And so that's very likely to come next year, and that comes into play with potentially guys like Darin Ruf, Wilmer Flores. And honestly, to me, it's a good thing because the more those guys can be in the lineup, the better. So I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, moving on to how about second base? This is another interesting position. They really all are interesting positions to me. By Fangraphs wins above replacement, again, this is only going to be counting guys whose primary position was second base, but they come in at 19th. So this was not really a position of strength for the Giants, and I expected that it would be, but it wasn't. Tommy La Stella was kind of their big offseason acquisition. They gave him this 3-year deal, the longest term deal they ever handed out under Farhan Zaidi. Obviously, it wasn't that lucrative of a contract. It was like $18 million total or so. But he did not have a particularly great season. But I think we saw, when all was said and done, what they like about him. The quality of the at-bats is good, and he's a kind of unique player. Really good kind of discipline, also the ability to kind of shorten up and just slap the ball all over the field, but also the ability to open up and hit for power. But it just didn't come together for him this year, and he dealt with a lot of injuries all season long. He's apparently going to see an Achilles or a foot specialist, I think, on Monday, and maybe he's going to require surgery. I have no idea, but he ended up only having a 94 weighted runs created plus, just a 308 on base percentage, a little below league average power. Strikeout rate was good at only 10.7%, but pretty much a non-factor this season, unfortunately, for Tommy La Stella. Actually, number one for them at this position in terms of wins above replacement was Donovan Solano, who predictably regressed in the average in balls in play department and was just down to a 105 weighted runs created plus. And actually their best offensive player at this position was Thairo Estrada with a 119 weighted runs created plus, 333 on base, 207 isolated power, 7 home runs in just 52 games. So Donovan Solano is reaching free agency, and I think it's like a natural progression to kind of let Donovan Solano move on and transition Thairo Estrada more into that exact same role. And I expect that that's what they'll do, and it's a pretty perfect solution. They're kind of, I don't want to call them necessarily similar players, but they kind of are in a lot of ways. They actually both had 17% strikeout rates and 7% walk rates, very similar in the strikeout and walk departments. Thairo Estrada demonstrated some good power, and also he can play a better shortstop and just defense in general, I think, than Donovan Solano. So that's where I see that. Tommy La Stella will be back, and a lot of people talking about, sign Marcus Semien to play second base, but they have La Stella, and so I don't know. They could put La Stella at first base and platoon with Flores or Ruff if Belt moves on, and then you could bring in a second baseman. I think they want to maintain that roster flexibility, and they have it because La Stella can be versatile. But anyway, they didn't get a ton of great production out of this position, but I would bank on them being better next year simply because I expect Tommy La Stella to be better in 2022. So anyway, coming up next, we'll look at the left side of the infield, third base, and shortstop. So stay tuned for that. But first, we're back in Better Than Ever, a new web interface for the start of the basketball season, and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, baseball postseason, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, here we go. We're going to look at the left side of the Giants infield. evaluate the state of them and look at how they performed in 2021 and what the future is at that position, the immediate future at that position. So let's talk about shortstop simply because that's going to be a more straightforward discussion. The Giants got really good production out of this position. When we look at players whose primary position was shortstop, my goodness, the Padres got 11 wins above replacement out of their primary shortstops. That's truly incredible. Next closest team was at 6.4. I know this is not a Padres show, but my goodness, I'm going to have to click on that and see. I know Tatis, obviously, but that's Tatis plus somebody else. Jake Cronenworth. All right. Anyway, sorry about that. I had to explore that. But anyway, second is the Brewers, and then right behind them is the San Francisco Giants. Remember, the Brewers, of course, had Willy Adames. That trade ignited their team. A lot was made of that. But the Giants are right there with them with Brandon Crawford and the season that he had, pretty much playing every day. I know he did have some more days off than usual, and he did land on the injured list for a hot second. But now this is interesting. Thairo Estrada is counted here as well. So my theory about them counting only players whose primary position was that position doesn't actually apply here. So I'll have to look into that more. But Brandon Crawford got far and away the most playing time at this position. He played in 138 games, and he had an MVP caliber season. He was about 40% above average offensively. He hit .298 with a .373 on base and .522 slugging, and put up 5.5 Fangraphs wins above replacement. Really good offensively, really good defensively, and he made some base running blunders along the way, but overall a net positive on the bases per Fangraphs. So, at the shortstop position in general, he was among the best in the game, and the Giants felt not the need, but they felt compelled to lock him up, and now he is under contract for 2 additional seasons. So he came in 4th in baseball at the shortstop position in terms of wins above replacement, behind Trey Turner, Fernando Tatis Jr., Carlos Correa, and ahead of Xander Bogaerts and Bo Bichette. So Brandon Crawford at age 34 years old had a really excellent season, and you all know that. And age is just kind of a number, and the Giants are defying the aging curve, and Farhan Zaidi even said as much. He basically said, these days, we're not so sure that applies. And that's the case with Crawford. It's the case with Buster Posey. We see Max Scherzer kind of defying age here. So I wouldn't read too much into the age thing. I just would be cautious about giving long-term deals with guaranteed money to players who are aging. I think injuries are probably more of a concern as players get older. But forget age. I mean, if you just don't think about that and just look at the production, the Giants got MVP type production out of this position. And he's the primary guy going into 2022 and 2023. So there are some really good free agent shortstops out there. And that's the one interesting thing about that extension to me was the Giants have all this money to spend, and the best free agents this winter are shortstops. And so does that take them out of the running before they even test that market for Carlos Correa, for Corey Seager, for Trevor Story, Marcus Semien? Now, I'm inclined to say no, because I don't think they would just want to do that to themselves. And I think all of those players could potentially play elsewhere, but the big question is, would they be willing to do it? We know Marcus Semien was willing to play second base this year with the Blue Jays, so to me, he's a guy who could continue to do that, and he was really good at that position. But Carlos Correa and Corey Seager, big-bodied shortstops, and I could potentially see them slotting over to third base. But the question is, would they be willing to do that? So that's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see where the Giants end up with all of this money they have to spend, and did they just take themselves out of the running for those players? I would be shocked given the talent of a Carlos Correa and a Corey Seager, and given the age. They're both just 27 years old, and those are guys even if you have a shortstop already, that the Giants should really consider signing and exploring that possibility. So that's why at third base, with Evan Longoria still under contract for one more year, I do wonder if it's possible that if they explored a Corey Seager, would they consider doing something with Evan Longoria? So Longoria did not finish out the year well with the Giants, and he struggled through the postseason through that one series, except he did have that one huge home run, obviously, in Game 3 in that 1-0 win. He hit the home run against Scherzer. But overall, the Giants actually got pretty good production out of third base. They were 10th overall by Fangraphs wins above replacement, including Longoria, Flores, and Bryant. Now, again, it's counting Flores. I don't know how Fangraphs is doing this, but I don't really like the way that they do this. But let's just talk about Longoria. He put together a pretty good season considering he only played 81 games. He was 23% above average by weighted runs created plus and 1.7 Fangraphs wins above replacement in just 81 games is actually really, really good. But I just continue to have concerns when I watch him hit against right-handed pitching. I said this all of last offseason that I thought he needed a platoon partner. His defense is really stabilizing. And when you're talking about like Tommy LaStella, the question is, can you handle him playing third base defensively if you're creating a platoon there? But I think we saw down the stretch with Longoria that he can have struggles at the plate. And I think he's particularly vulnerable against right-handed pitching. I'll need to look closer at his platoon splits kind of in the last several years and see if there's a trend there with him. But I think it's a position where they could look to upgrade, and I'm not exactly sure what that would mean for him, whether it means being platooned, whether it means being more of a utility guy. I do wonder if he could move over to second base and platoon with a Tommy LaStella there. So, if you get a stud like Carlos Correa to come over and play third base for you. So these are all kind of out there possibilities, but just stuff to be explored. Longoria is under contract for one additional season. So anyway, I think they need to upgrade at third base and, for 2022. And that's just my thoughts on that. And I kind of felt the same way going into 2021. Anyway, coming up tomorrow, we are going to do a mailbag. And then I guess next week is when we're going to look at the pitching. So once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. You can follow me on Twitter at Ben Kaspick. That's Kaspick. That's where we put out the prompt for the mailbag. So look out for that, and you can ask me a question there, and we'll get to them tomorrow. Thank you so much again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, gives you his unique perspective on the majors, present and past. That show is free and available on all platforms as well. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I cannot wait to be with you again tomorrow with that mailbag. You are now Locked On Giants.